The key to making more money is to put our money to work. That means our money needs to be working for us. And the only way to do that is to invest. My name is Darius.
And I'm Carmen. By the end of this video, you are going to know the 4 steps you need to take in order to invest your first $1,000. So let's jump into that video, shall we?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we need to pay ourselves first because, like I said, it's our money making money, not us making money. So if we're thinking we're just going to take our income and put it straight into an investment, that's what what we think our retirement account is for. But we need to do a little more work on our end. So what that means is we need to have a formula set up for ourselves so that we can start making the necessary adjustments to have our money working for us. And that means we can't have to go in and dip into our little stash in order to take money out because it's taken away from our future selves.
Yes. So let's protect our assets in more ways than one. And we are going to go through the 4 steps. So the very first step that we are going to say or recommend you do is to develop your 20-50-30 rule. Now we rearrange the ratios because 20% of your income should be first, and that should be what you are saving or paying yourself first. 50% should be going towards your fixed income or your needs. And then the 30% should be going to flexible or your wants. So we have it arranged in this way, how we use personally, because it allows us to categorize our spending and to prioritize our spending to make sure that we aren't overextending ourselves in our wants or our needs, for example, and that we are always prioritizing saving our money. So the idea with this is we want to make sure that 1 million families create financial freedom for whatever that looks like for you. And we recognize that the only way this is going to happen is if you have a solid foundation in place, and that has to start with organizing your spending and start spending with intention. You can call it a budget, you can call it whatever it is. We're trying to put a different spin on budgeting because we want to empower you all to look at budgeting from a different eye in terms of being more strategic and not feeling like you're skimping or you're holding yourself back from doing the things that you want to do. We can do everything that we want to do. We just have to plan for it.
Right. So the first thing we have to do is we have to pay ourselves first. The second thing, which is a subcategory of the savings portion of things, is we need to build up an ABC account, which means that if anything that comes up that's a large purchase, we need to have about $2,000 in this specific account. So if this is your first $1,000, then you need to put it in an ABC account so that when and if something happens, you don't have to go into debt, which is going to cost you a lot more money than paying cash for it would. So we're going to save you some money on that by having this ABC account available for large purchases. The reason why it's $2,000 is because the average large expense for an unexpected expense is about $1,400. So what we did is we wanted to add a little cushion in there so it can be an even number. We have more than we need, $2,000, so that if your furnace goes out or if your car blows a tire and you need new tires, you have the ability to get cash for that and not have to worry about debt, which is going to end up costing you more money by putting it on a credit card.
Absolutely. And ABC basically stands for whatever A, B, and C is miscellaneous. Whatever A, B, and C is, we want to make sure that you have the funds available to cover A, B, and C should you need it. And the background behind this, let's make sure that you understand this, is that 50% of Americans cannot afford a $500 emergency. This is huge because in the grand scheme of things, compared to the U.S. debt, $500 really isn't that much money. So we need to make sure.
It's a lot of money if you don't have it.
We need to make sure that you have that plan in place to be able to cover the $500, right? Because you're probably spending more than that in interest because of the debt that you have to go into in order to cover that $500 expense, right? So what we recognize is before we do anything, we all want to invest. We all want to create cash flow. We want to do these things, but a lot of times we don't have our bases covered before we start investing. So that's why we're creating this 4-step formula to make sure you have whatever you need in place before you start investing, gambling, whatever you want to call it, with your money. Cover your house, cover your assets to make sure that if expenses come up, A, B, or C, this is AKA your emergency fund, right? We don't want to manifest emergencies. That's why we call it the ABC fund. So the idea is just making sure that you have $2,000 on hand. Should something come up, you can pay for it and it doesn't affect anything that you got going on.
Right. Now, next thing is...
Oh, wait, before we go into the next thing, click on that link below if you want to join our Pay Yourself First challenge. We are challenging everyone to have a plan, spend intentionally. And if you want to join us, go ahead and click on that link below. We are doing it live inside of our community.
Now, the next thing is you want to make sure that if something was to happen to you, your family's covered.
Yes.
Because it's one thing for you to go out and work and say that you want to invest. You're investing for a purpose so that you can have a certain lifestyle. Now, something happens to you, your family won't have the ability to have that lifestyle unless you have your family protection in place, which means you should have some life insurance. Now, it's up to you the type of life insurance that you get, either be convertible term or whole life. You just want to make sure that your family is covered and protected.
Mm-hmm. And I can't stress this enough, because we just had the conversation recently where we were even thinking about the opportunity for us to get more insurance, because as our income continues to go up, we should be able to have that same amount of coverage to cover our bases, literally, to make sure that we have the set amount of income should something happen to us. And what we know just in life, what we know being in the insurance industry, is that it's going to happen. It's life insurance. And more families are not protected than there are families who are protected. And this is something that has to be prioritized, because we tend to, as consumers, prioritize other things than a life insurance policy, for example. In fact, a life insurance policy is usually the first expense that goes when you fall into a financial hardship. So that's why we want to make sure, again, we have these bases covered. So if you fall into some sort of financial hardship, it's not going to affect you and thinking whether or not you need to keep this policy, because you have to keep this policy on deck, because you never know when you're going to pass.
Right. And the reason why life insurance is one of the things that goes, because people don't have money saved up to take care of that emergency. Mm-hmm. Now, or
they don't value it as much, mm-hmm. right? Because I would say, when I was first learning about life insurance, I could understand why it would just go by the wayside, because I didn't really value it. But it wasn't until we started understanding more, we started living more of life and recognizing that we had more family members that weren't prepared, and we never want to put our own family in that situation, or even seeing, friends, extended relatives, things like that. So for me, that's why I would say, for me, it was a value thing.
Yeah. I mean, when you're young, you feel invincible.
Totally.
And I mean, I used to drive without a seatbelt and speed and all kind of stuff. I felt invincible. Don't do that now.
You? Speed?
Yeah. Don't ride around with no insurance.
Riding dirty.
Walking around with no life insurance, that's walking dirty. but anyways, up until this point, we talked about in the formula, we need to pay ourselves first, and within that, we need to make sure that we have our ABC account for emergencies. Next, we need to have our family protected so that if anything happens to us. Now we need to start building up something called a stash account, which is basically 6 months of your needs saved. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why we say 6 months of needs saved is because if you were to have a loss in income, you're not going to be saving money. If you were to have a loss in income, you're not going to be worried about having the best pair of sneakers on your wants. But because we broke down our income into these three categories, we know what's the most important thing that we need, which is our needs. And that's the 6 months of savings that we need to have covered in this stash account, so that we can make sure that we don't tap into or go into debt, to make sure that we can continue to provide for our family. Because the one thing you may not be able to tap into is debt, because bank's not going to give you money when you don't have any income.
Absolutely.
So you need to make sure you have a stash account, 6 months of your needs taken care of, so that you don't have to worry about going to the bank or having to go in debt for any of your needs.
Very good point. Again, I keep saying the same thing, but we're covering the basis, and this is leading us up into the point where we can invest. Mm-hmm. So like we said, with the recap, you have to think about these points before you start investing, because you have to have this money stashed away so that when you do have the cash flow to make sense to invest and start creating friends with aka interest, you already have, again, all of your bases covered. You have the savings, you have the 6 months of your needs covered, you have your life insurance in place. You just have what I would call financial freedom, because you know that should anything come up, you're already ready for it, right? You're not on the defense anymore. Now you're on the offense. And now you get to play a different game, knowing that you have the protection in place, knowing that you have the cash in place to allow you to invest, to then create more money so that it can eventually replace your income.
Right. Now, the key here is when you have $1,000, you can't need it. That's the whole point of your money making money, is that money has to sit and it has to be out there working. It can't work if you keep calling it back to go and do something else.
Hence not having your bases covered.
Not paying yourself first, not having your ABC account, not having your family protected, not having your stash account. If you don't have these things in place, you're going to have to get that money back. You're going to have to dip into that investment, and your investment's not an investment anymore if it's not there.
How many y'all dipped into your 401k?
So what we need to do,
as I spill my drink. Now it's got to tell me, don't be ugly. Spilling my drink.
So what we have to make sure, we're organized in a sense to where our money is able to actually do the job that we send it out to do.
That is the biggest point. We could have led with that. We should have led with that. That's the biggest point, is when you invest, you can't need the money. You can't call it back, because that's not investing, right? So for everyone out there who is thinking about investing, you have to cover your bases first and foremost before you start investing your money, so that you can invest with peace, right? Don't you want a peace of mind knowing that you don't have to call any dollars back because you already have it ready? It's just a different mindset shift that we want you to think about.
So if you want more information on how to manage your account into these 3 different categories, then check out our next video where we tell you how we manage our funds.
And don't forget to own your own lifestyle,
or someone else will.